Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the National Transit Database webinar for new geographic area data requirements. Thank you all so much for joining us today. As a disclaimer, the contents of this presentation do not have the force and effect of the law and are not meant to bind the public in any way. This presentation is intended only to provide clarity to the public regarding existing requirements under the law or agency policies. Grantees and subgrantees should refer to FTA statutes and regulations for applicable National Transit Database requirements. We have two goals today. One is to provide an overview of NTD requirements for geographic area data and how they apply to the NTD reporting system. And the second one is to identify helpful resources and tools to assist agencies in reporting their geographic data. We will begin by discussing the history of these requirements, including the BIL that started these requirements before moving on to the B15 form, P50 form where you will upload your GTFS web link, and then Jared will discuss resources and we will wrap up. This slide identifies contact information you should use when you are unable to contact your assigned validation analyst or when you are having technical issues with the reporting system. The NTD Reporting Application Support Desk is available from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday, and that's in Eastern Standard Time. This help desk is a resource and should be used as a resource to help with questions regarding questions regarding requests across all FTA-specific applications and systems, such as login issues, system errors or bugs, or performance issues. The non-technical NTD program support services are staffed by NTD analysts Monday through Friday between the hours of 8 and 7 p.m., and that's also Eastern Standard Time. You should contact this help desk if you have any questions or need clarification regarding an NTD policy or reporting requirement. Please note you should only use this help desk when you are unable to reach your assigned validation analyst. Again, my name is Taisha Anderson, and I will be presenting the first portion of today's webinar, and I have Jared McCarthy who will be presenting the second portion. Joining us to assist with Q&A, we have Lee Lumsden and Melissa Conti. If you have any general questions throughout the webinar, please use the Q&A feature. If you have questions that are specific to your agency, we ask that you reach out to your validation analyst directly for assistance. This slide identifies FTA program contacts. We have Chelsea Chamlin, who's the NTD Program Manager for the Office of Budget and Policy, and Melissa, who is the NTD Operations Deputy Project Manager. For our key reference documents, you will see the NTD Reporting Policy Manuals for both full and reduced reporters, and the link to the GTFS Builder provided by the National RTAP. Now we will discuss the history of the requirements. The Geographic Area Data Requirement was part of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or BIL. The BIL was amended to require the NTD to collect GTFS data and geographic area coverage to fulfill this requirement. If you are interested in finding out more about the BIL, you can refer to the Federal Register notice that is linked here. The GTFS requirement began last year, report year 2023. Starting in RY23, all agencies that operated fixed route service are required to create and maintain a GTFS feed. All agencies that operate demand response service are required to complete the Geographic Area Coverage B15 form. Please note it is possible for agencies to complete both the GTFS feed and the B15 form. Speaking of the B15 form, let's talk about what that is. So first, does this apply to your agency? It's the question everyone wants to know. If your agency operates demand response services and you are a full urban reduced, rural, or tribal reporter, you are required to complete the B15 form. The only agencies that the form does not apply to are reduced asset or group plan sponsor reporters. So for questions 1 through 3 of the B15 form, there's 10 total. We'll start with 1 through 3. And you can see the overview of it here. The first question on the B15 form asks agencies if their demand response service serves residents in another state besides the state that they are located in. We typically see agencies select yes if they are located close to a border of a neighboring state. For example, there's a city in Virginia and Tennessee called Bristol, where one side of Main Street is in the state of Virginia and the other side of Main Street is in the state of Tennessee. This means it is possible for agencies in the Bristol area to serve both Virginia and Tennessee. In that case, they would select yes. The second question on the B15 form asks agencies to select the counties that they serve, either in whole or in part, where they pick up residents for a new trip origination. For this question, agencies should select all counties that their demand response serves. Going back to our Bristol example, if the agency is in Bristol, Virginia, then they would select Bristol City, Virginia. In this case, they do serve Tennessee as well, so they would also select Sullivan County, Tennessee, which is the county that Bristol, Tennessee is located in. For question number 3, you will select census places that your agency's demand response service serves, and you will indicate whether you wholly or partially serve the area. If you serve an entire area, you would select wholly, and if you serve part of an area, you would select partially. It is important to note while the actual question gives examples of townships, your options could also be cities, towns, boroughs, villages, etc. If we go back to our Bristol example and the agency serves the entire city of Bristol, Virginia, you would select Bristol City, Virginia, and wholly. If the agency serves some of Bristol, Tennessee, and some of Sullivan's Gardens, Census Designated Place, or CDP, you would select partially. I mentioned the term CDP on the last slide, but I realize some of you may not be familiar with that acronym. A CDP is a Census Designated Place. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, census designated places are statistical geography representing closely settled, unincorporated communities that are locally recognized and identified by name. As we discussed on the last slide, these include cities, boroughs, villages, etc. Going back to our Bristol example, since the agency is in Bristol, Virginia, and serves Bristol, Tennessee, it may also serve Bluff City, Tennessee, and Bristol City, Tennessee. In this screenshot, you can see the Bristol example that I've been referring to, including the areas around Bristol, such as Blunteville, Tennessee, which is a census designated place. Make note of the FTA census map as a resource. On this slide, you can see questions 4 and 5 on the B15, which we will discuss now. Question 4 asks, is your demand response intended to meet the Americans with Disabilities ADA complementary paratransit requirements for a fixed route system? If any part of your demand response service is intended to meet the ADA requirements, you should select yes. It is important to note that not all demand response services are required by the ADA. The ADA requires that transit agencies provide demand response services within a 3/4 mile radius of their fixed route service. Having demand response service that is only available to seniors and/or those with disabilities does not automatically mean that it is required by the ADA. Question 5 should only be answered if you select yes to question 4, and it reads, if yes to question 4, is your service limited to ADA complementary paratransit distance for either your own NTD reporter, your own NTD reporter ID, or you will select the other NTD reporter IDs. If your demand response service is for your own agency, you will select yes under your own NTD reporter ID. If you provide demand response services for another agency, you should select their IDs. So for question 4, your agency should determine whether you have a fixed route system that your demand response service supplements by offering an ADA accessible alternative. We have two examples here, Agency A and Agency B. In our first scenario, Agency A operates a fixed route service and provides ADA complimentary paratransit through their demand response service to riders who they are unable to accommodate through their fixed route service. Agency A should report yes for question 4 because they are supplementing their fixed route service with demand response service for specific riders. In our second scenario, Agency B does not operate a fixed route service and only reports demand response service. Agency B would report no to question 4 because they do not operate a demand response service to support a fixed route service. Moving on to question 5, as mentioned previously, you will only answer this if you answered yes to question 4. This is because question 5 is diving deeper into the service you stated you did offer in your response to question 4. To answer question 5, you should determine what area you cover with your ADA complimentary paratransit service. Again, we have two examples, Agency A and Agency B. In the first scenario, Agency A provides service that is intended to meet the ADA complimentary paratransit requirements for a fixed route system for only their own service area. This means Agency A should select yes to question 5. This indicates that they are only providing service for the service area covered by their own agency. In our second scenario, Agency B also provides service that is intended to meet the complementary paratransit requirements for a fixed route service for their own service area, but they also cover an area that is for an adjacent NTD reporter. Agency B would select no to the first part of question 5 and then fill in the NTD reporter ID for the agency they cover as well. This indicates that in addition to their own NTD ID, they also provide service for another agency's fixed route system and notes what agency that is with that agency's NTD ID. Here you will see questions 6 and 7 of the B15 form, which we will discuss now. Question 6 asks, within your service area, do you have different passenger eligibility requirements or different terms and conditions of service? You will either select yes or no. Question 7 asks, which days of the week do you operate? You will select the days of the week that your agency operates your demand response service by using the check boxes and then click on Create Days of the Week, which is a button at the bottom. It is very important that you click on that button because it will generate the days that you have selected in question number 8. Please note if you accidentally select a day, it will generate in question number 8, so you will need to deselect the day in question number 7 and then click on Create Days of the Week again. Once you have done so, it should remove the day that was entered in error. Now we will move on to question 8. Here's a quick look at that question in the form. As you can see, the days of the week you selected in question 8 will be generated. Question 8 asks, for each day of the week, what are your hours of operation and is your service open to? To complete question 8, you will need to fill out the times that your demand response service begins and ends for each day that you operate. Please note the form expects you to report the hour and minute that your service begins and ends. You will select the checkbox labeled ends next day for any days that your service operates or ends past 12 a.m. or midnight the following day. You will also need to report on the eligibility for your passengers, which we will talk about next. After you have completed the times that your service begins and ends, you will move on to the eligibility selections for each day of the week. As you can see on this slide, you should select yes to complimentary paratransit eligible if your service is intended to meet the ADA complimentary paratransit requirements for a fixed route system and which is restricted to persons for your agency that your agency has found eligible for paratransit service. If your agency does not meet this requirement, then you should select no. You should select yes to the age or disability or low income eligibility if your service is restricted to the elderly, disabled, or low income riders, but is not intended to meet the ADA complementary paratransit requirement for fixed route systems. If your service does not limit riders that meet these requirements, you should select no. Finally, you should select yes to the general population selection if you operate a service that has no eligibility restrictions. If your service does not have eligibility restrictions, then you should select no. Please note that you have to enter a begin and end time to answer either yes or no for every day of the week that you operate and every eligibility under question 8. The system will not let you save the form without making these selections. Since question 8 houses a lot of information, there are a few key things that I would like to point out. It is possible for an agency to operate demand response that comprises several different services. Different services are often branded differently and may have different service hours, service areas, and eligibility requirements. Agencies should only select yes for multiple categories in question 8 when they have separate services within their demand response mode that have different eligibility requirements. We will go over an example in the next slide. In the first example, Agency A only offers one service that is open to everyone and satisfies the ADA complementary paratransit requirement. Agency A should report yes for general population and no for complementary paratransit eligible and age or disability or low income eligible riders. Even though they carry passengers who are seniors and paratransit eligible, the service is not restricted to those groups. Agency B offers service to the general public, but has a separate microtransit service that satisfies the ADA complementary paratransit requirement. Agency B should select yes to general population and ADA complementary paratransit eligible because it is restricting service to these groups by providing two separate demand response services. They should report no for age or disability or low income. Just to recap, agencies should only report yes to multiple eligibility requirements if their service restricts service to passengers who meet that criteria. If you have any questions on how to fill out the eligibility categories, please contact your assigned validation analyst directly, and they will help you determine the best way to report question 8. We will now move on to the last questions of the B15 form, questions 9 and 10. Question 9 asks, what is the minimum advance reservation time for your service? You will have the ability to select between days or hours on the form and then fill in a number value. Please note that we are looking for the minimum advance reservation time, meaning the latest your agency will accept a ride. If this is 24 hours, you should report 1 day. Question 10 asks, what is the fare charge? Agencies should report the most commonly charged fare that they charge passengers. Please note agencies should not take into account organization paid fares for question 9, for question 10. You should only report what you charge passengers and not what organizations pay for riders. Question 9, here we have two examples. In our first example, Agency A requires passengers to call and schedule a ride at least 1 hour before they want to ride. This agency would report 1 hour on the form. Agency B requires that riders call by the end of the previous day to schedule a ride for the next day. Agency B should report 1 day on the form. Please note agencies should only report 24 hours when they have a strict 24-hour minimum reservation time. Now we will go through two examples for how to complete question 10. In the first example, Agency A does not charge their riders for their paratransit services. Agency A should report 0 for question 10. Agency B does not charge seniors, which are passengers over the age of 65 years old, to ride their service. However, they do charge other riders a fare of $3. The agency has determined that their service is primarily used by seniors over the age of 65. Agency B should report 0 for question 10 because their service is mostly used by riders who are not charged. One of the functionalities of the B15 form is that agencies can copy their responses to all questions from one B15 form to another. This is helpful for agencies that have similar characteristics between both demand response services, as it saves time when filling out the report package. To clarify, this can only be done if an agency is reporting two demand response modes. For example, a demand response mode that they directly operate and a demand response mode that a contractor operates. In our example, Agency A operates demand response directly operated and demand response purchase transportation, but their service is the same between both modes. Agency A can complete one B15 form and use the copy function to copy their responses to the other B15 form. In addition to being able to copy your responses between B15 forms, each B15 form will automatically pull in data that your agency reported last year. In other words, the responses your agency reported in the prior report year will carry over into the current report year you are currently working on. This is helpful for agencies whose demand response service did not change from the prior year. Agencies are also able to view the prior year's B15 form by clicking on View Previous Year Data at the top of the form if you want to compare year to year. The last thing I will go over are some common validation analysts that our validation analysts see. Validation issues, excuse me. Sometimes agencies confuse the comparison between question 4 and question 8. As a reminder, question 4 asks if the demand response service is intended to meet the ADA complementary paratransit requirements for fixed routes, and question 8 is where agencies select yes to the eligibility categories that their demand response service is restricted to. Sometimes agencies will report yes to question 4, but then select no for complementary paratransit eligible in questions 8. If an agency provides demand response service that supplements their fixed route service by meeting the ADA complementary paratransit requirements, and their service is restricted to complementary paratransit riders, they should select yes for question 4 and yes to complementary paratransit in question 8. If their service provides ADA coverage for a fixed route system, but they do not restrict service to complementary paratransit riders, then they would select yes to question 4, but select no to the complementary paratransit eligibility in question 8. Another common validation issue that validation analysts see is that agencies will select yes to question 4 and not complete question 5. As a reminder, question 5 should only be completed if your agency selects yes to question 4 and it asks you to note whether your service is intended to meet the ADA complementary paratransit requirements for a fixed route system for your own agency or for other agencies as well as your own. We also see agencies that select their demand response service is intended to meet the ADA complementary paratransit requirements for a fixed route system other than their own NTD ID, but then they do not input the other agency's NTD ID in question number 5. Agencies should fill in all other NTD IDs in which they meet this criteria besides their own. Sometimes agencies will report 24 hours for their minimum advance reservation time for question 9. This is not always incorrect. However, the validation analyst will ask the agency to confirm that they intended to report 24 hours instead of 1 day. As a reminder, agencies should only report 24 hours if they have a strict cutoff of a minimum 24 hours to request the ride. If customers must request the ride by a certain cutoff time the previous day, which is unrelated to the time that they wish to be picked up, the agency should report 1 day for the minimum advance reservation time. For example, if I wanted a ride for tomorrow, but the only requirement was that I scheduled the ride by the close of business today, your agency would report 1 day. Lastly, agencies will calculate an average fare and report that for question 10. Instead, agencies should report the most commonly charged fare. In other words, agencies who have 2 or more fare groups should report the most common fare that their passengers are charged and not an average of the multiple fare groups. Now I will turn the presentation over to Jared, who will finish up our webinar.
Thank you, Taisha. Are you able to see my screen right now?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. All right, seamless transition. So thank you, Taisha, and to all 396 of you joining us. For the next part of the presentation, we'll be looking at the P50 form and the general transit feed specification component of NTD reporting. As Taisha mentioned, GTFS is a new reporting requirement that NTD just started collecting from all reporters with fixed route service in report year 2023. Before we dive into the form, we're going to look at what GTFS is physically, how it's made, and how your riders will interact with it. Sorry, one moment. There we go. So what is GTFS? GTFS, as I said in the previous slide, General Feed Transit Specification, is a data format that stores data about a transit agency's service. It's standardized. It was created in the early 2000s by a developer at Google. This includes where your agency's stops are, what routes your agency has, and where they are, where they go, what times your buses come, or your ferries come, or any of your service, what days you take as holidays, what days are reduced service, etc. While all that information may be available on placards, posters, agency website, maps, at your bus stops, in GTFS, it's organized in a standard way so that programs can read these timetables and geospatial data into transit planning software. The purpose for that will come later in the presentation, but that's the general overview. So does this apply to your agency? Right now, NTD is collecting GTFS data from all reporters that operate a fixed route and submit service data, like ridership data, to the NTD annually. GTFS submissions should cover any fixed route mode and type of service, for example, motor bus and direct operated. The NTD reporting manual lists all of these modes and whether they are fixed routes. It includes, as I mentioned, motor bus, ferry, light rail, etc. Importantly, GTFS, this requirement does not include demand response service, so only these fixed route modes. So under the hood of a GTFS feed is a folder with a series of text files in it. 6 of these text files are essential, meaning that the programs that read GTFS cannot interpret a feed with fewer than these 6 files. There are additional optional text files that can improve the quality of a GTFS feed. These can include more schedule data, more geospatial data, fare data, and developer information. So with these 6 text files, and however many optional files an agency includes, a program equipped to interpret GTFS can read your feed into a mapping or transit planning software. These can be useful for your agency internally when you're planning transit in the future and looking at analyzing your transit service right now. And importantly, it can be public facing for your riders who may already use a third-party mapping application like Google Maps to do most of their transit planning personally. This photo right here shows what a text file looks like. If this is intimidating, you don't have to sweat, because when we get into how to build a GTFS feed, you'll notice that you won't ever actually have to be inputting any of this information, any of these numbers or anything like this in this way. So GTFS required files. I mentioned there are 6 of them that are required. The 6 required ones are agency.txt. This is a text file that contains your agency contact information, name, time zone, and other facts about your agency. Stops.txt is a text file that gives the latitude and longitude of your stops, which is vital for the geospatial component of a GTFS feed. Routes.txt includes different combinations of stops for your various routes to complete each route. So going from stop A to stop B to stop C, completing a route that way. Calendar or calendar dates.txt gives the time and dates of your service. So which days you operate, from what hours, what days are holidays, etc. Trips and stop times are both generated by the relationship that your routes, stops, and calendars have with one another. It produces information that may be found on a map and timetable of your service in a way that a GTFS capable program can interpret. Feedinfo.txt and shapes.txt are optional, but recommended. Feedinfo is a developer resource, basically. So who can a developer at a mapping software contact if they notice an error in your GTFS feed? This could be someone at NTD, most likely myself, or someone at Google or Apple Maps that has your feed, notices an error, and has a question about who to contact. Shapes.txt is a geospatial container that allows a mapping software to trace your service's routes onto a map of the corresponding streets, railways, and other physical infrastructure. So why is GTFS useful to my riders? GTFS data is used by application-based mapping software to display an agency's service to riders where they get their transit information. This includes, as I mentioned, Apple Maps, Google Maps, Waze, any of these apps. Take your pick. GTFS allows transit agencies to get their service where people already look. For example, in the photo on the right, I've used Google Maps to help me find a way from my home in Pentagon City to Huntington, Virginia. Using the GTFS feed that's managed by WMATA, this transit app told me that I can get on the yellow line and it will take me 25 minutes compared to 49 minutes on the bus. This is what GTFS can do for riders. It allows them to make decisions and get from point A to point B, taking into account time, how far of a walk it is from their current location, how frequently service operates on that time of day, on that day, what fares, if any, this agency charges for this mode, and the specific trip, how much it might cost. If you've used this feature, which I imagine many of you have in any mapping app, you've already interacted with the GTFS. So building a GTFS, how do we actually do it? Looking at the text file on that earlier slide, where we looked under the hood of a GTFS feed, can seem like a daunting task to create one. Because GTFS relies on a very specific structure in syntax, writing your own text file to represent your agency's service can be a large and time-consuming order. Because of this, agencies may experience fewer headaches using a dedicated GTFS builder, such as the free one provided by the Rural Transit Assistance Program, which we're going to explore later in the webinar. Excel-based GTFS builders like RTAPs allow an analyst at any agency, even without coding experience or knowledge of what a text file might include, to type in their agency's data and use the macros built into these builders to generate a GTFS feed as a folder with all the required text files and any optional ones, without needing to actually go into the text files and format the data beyond putting it in the correct column and row in the Excel builder. For example, instead of typing out a comma-separated string of thousands of stop times, where a stop is what time the vehicle goes there, you simply put the stop's latitude and longitude and the times your service will be at these stops into the Excel builder, and the macros will automatically calculate this long string of stop times, spit it out as a text file. A GTFS web link. A GTFS web link is a URL that will automatically download your GTFS zip file. This is what you'll report on the P50 form and how NTD will interact with your data. Valid web links will usually end in .zip or .ashx in the web link. In the example below in blue, you'll see it ends in .zip and begins with https://, just like any other URL. If you click this link, as validation analysts will for NTD, it will automatically initiate a download of your GTFS feed, and this is how NTD is going to interact with your data. So how do I create a GTFS web link? It may look tricky. So if your agency has an IT department, that would be a great starting point. If not, or if you want to go a different route, one way to do so is to use National Rural Transit Assistance Program, RTAP. They have a web hosting service. One thing to note is that every time you update your GTFS feed, i.e. your service changes, you remove a stop, anything like that, you'll need to ensure that this is reflected in the web link that you report. It may well mean that the web link itself doesn't change, so long as the data that the web link directs to is updated. The web link itself isn't the data. It's basically a pointer that points to where your zip file is. That's how I like to think about it. So uploading your web link to the P50 form. NTD Reporter users can access and add GTFS links by navigating to the grid, what I call the waffle iron. It's at the top right of your page, and you'll go down and see with a red arrow, it says GTFS, General Transit Feed Specification. You'll click there. Alternatively, you can go to, you can add a GTFS link via the NTD Reporter profile under Related Actions. As shown below, you can see it says View and Manage General Transit Feed Specification /P50. That's just one of two ways you can do it. Once you get there, regardless of how you get there, you'll enter your agency's NTD ID into the first field. The form's already pre-populated, so it should immediately come up with your agency's NTD ID as one of or the only option. After you do that, you'll select the mode from the drop-down menu, which again is pre-populated with only modes that you've already reported, and then the corresponding type of service. Now, this is kind of a sticky point for some agencies, many. Each mode and type of service will have a GTFS feed submitted for it. However, that does not mean that you need to create a different GTFS feed for every mode and type of service. All that means is that this GTFS feed contains this mode and type of service within it. So if all your service is reflected in one GTFS feed, you just submit that exact same web link for each mode of your feed. So if you operate a ferry boat and a motor bus mode and have them both in the same GTFS feed, you'll submit the web link once for ferry boat and once for motor bus, even though it's the same feed. Agency ID, this last one with the red arrow, is an optional field. We recommend that you complete this field if there's a unique agency ID identifying your agency in agency.txt, which is a text file within your GTFS. The last part of this is the D10 certification. CEOs or CEO delegates must annually certify that the GTFS web links are up to date at the time of certification in this D10 form. It may require coordination between you/the analyst and your CEO or CEO delegate certifying the report. I'll note if your GTFS is still reflective of your up-to-date service and the calendar in calendar.txt is not expired in the report year, you don't need to re-upload your feed from the previous year. Your CEO or CEO delegate will still need to certify that it's up to date, but you can just click the yes, our GTFS web link is up to date instead of going through the hassle of re-uploading the same GTFS feed that is still up to date. Updating it year to year, as I just mentioned, but to expand on it, When an agency changes their service, that is when they'll need to update their GTFS feed to reflect their new service. This can include changing a stop, adding a new fixed route, reducing service on Sundays, adding a new holiday, or just if your calendar expires and you need to update it for the current report year. Once an agency updates their data, they can either add a new web link or certify on the D10 that their old web link now links to the same GTFS data that is updated. A helpful tip is that if your analyst keeps the name of your GTFS feed the same year over year, the web link itself, that URL, won't need to change so long as it links to the new GTFS feed. Now we're going to look at common issues in validation relating to the P50 form and GTFS. One of the most common issues that we see is when agencies upload a link to their transit or municipal webpage instead of a direct GTFS web link. The GTFS web link uploaded to the P50 form should be a direct link, meaning that when a user clicks on it, whether it's you or an analyst at NTD, it automatically downloads your GTFS and you'll see the little download bar. If your web link takes users to your website and requires them to click an additional link to download the GTFS, a validation issue will be raised. Another common validation issue that we've found is with web links versus documents. If your agency uploads a GTFS document, like a zip file, instead of a web link, Another issue that will be raised is if your agency uploads a GTFS document, like a zip file, instead of the web link that we just talked about. It's preferred that you upload a web link instead of a document. If you don't upload a web link and you do upload a document like a zip file, a validation issue will be raised asking for you to explain why you're uploading a document instead, and you'll provide justification subject to review by the validation analyst. As a reminder here, National RTAP provides free URL hosting. It takes less than 10 minutes to create your web link. You just give RTAP your zip file, your GTFS zip file, and it spits out a web link that you can then copy and paste into the P50 form. And it's stable year after year. So that's one resource that we recommend. GTFS validator results. Part of validating your GTFS includes using the canonical GTFS validator tool developed by Mobility Data to identify any errors. We link to it here. If there are any errors in your GTFS feed with how it's structured, your validation analyst will send you an email. You'll be alerted by email to any errors and warnings that are generated by your feed. And with some errors that alert to missing required files, remember, some text files are mandatory for a computer to read them. Your GTFS feed will need to be revised to be accepted to NTD. And conversely, with some warnings and some errors, you'll still get an email reminding you about them as a gentle hint that maybe next year you could improve your feed quality by fixing them, but they're not required for it to be accepted into NTD. So now that we've explored GTFS, the P50 and B15 forms, we're going to look a little at resources for you as an agency to get these done well and with as little heartache as possible. GTFS resources, the RTAP GTFS builder. The first resource that we're going to explore is the RTAP GTFS builder that I mentioned a few slides ago. Using an Excel-based GTFS builder is the easiest way to ensure that your GTFS text files are actually in the correct format and syntax. To use these builders here, what you do is you simply put in your timetables, your stops, latitude, and longitudes, and other data points specified by the builder, and the enabled macros will generate a folder with all the required GTFS files. RTAP's builder will even validate important data points before you create a GTFS text file to ensure little errors in syntax get caught before you get further down the line making your feed. And this photo shows you what the RTAP GTFS builder looks like. And you can see you type in your stops, the head sign, which is explained in the builder, what days it operates, and then your actual timetable goes right here. And when you click Generate GTFS feed, it'll spit it out in a text file, so you don't actually have to write out that long string of thousands of stop times. accessing RTAP resources. To access RTAP resources, we'll link to their website. Right in the resources tab, you can find large manuals describing the ins and outs of how to use their builder and also links to the Excel builder. Additionally, you can attend office hours every Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time with the team at RTAP. I believe at least one person from RTAP is here. Hi, Marcy, if you are. Or some agencies reach out via phone or email for more tailored help that RTAP can provide you as well. GTFS resources for web link hosting. Additionally, right under the office hours button on RTAP's website that we just looked at is their upload GTFS feed button. This is how you can create a web link from your GTFS feed folder with all of those text files in a URL form that you'll eventually put into your P50 form. You input your GTFS text files, it outputs a web link that's stable and that is valid, and you can then upload to the P50 form. Switching over to the B15, you can use the FTA census map to understand which census places your service operates in to report on your B15 form. You navigate to the FTA census map and turn on the layer that says census designated places, which you can then reference against census places that you'll find on the B15 form. I believe, yeah, here's a photo. So this is the FTA census map. All these gray blobs are different census designated places. In order to see it, it's a little unintuitive. If there's the eye with the line through it, that means you can't see it. You click the I can't see it and it turns it on so that you can see it. And this is how you'll find these census designated places, which you can reference in the B15. On the B15 form, under question 3, there is a reference file that you can use to review all counties and census places within your state. Be sure to save any changes on the form before downloading it to ensure that the file reflects the most up-to-date information. Sometimes census designated places change, merge, the boundaries are redrawn. And so be sure to save any changes before you get that up-to-date version that you're going to want to reference on the B15. Okay, that concludes our webinar for today on geographic area data requirements. We know we covered a lot of information, so at this point, we're going to open it up to Laurie and questions from the audience and comments for myself and Taisha, Melissa and Lee on these forms and other topics that we covered today.
My gosh, thanks, Jared. So there's 3 open questions still. Should I read them out loud, or do you want to do it that way? Well, one of the questions is about, I'm sorry. Sorry.
No, you're good. I was just going to say that works for me.
Okay. So the first question, which I guess this is for everyone, Melissa actually asked me in a DM. Susie Trinidad wants to know if we're going to provide a copy of the questions and answers submitted. And what I have been doing for about the past year or so is putting the link in the description for the webinar on our YouTube page. So in the past approximate year, if you look at the description of the video, the link should be there. I don't know if it's clickable. I think you have to copy and paste. So I have been trying to do that when possible. I will put the link to our YouTube page in the chat as soon as I can. So Thomas asked if there's a syntax guide available for the Excel macro. That's not a question for me.
Sorry, it took a sec for me to unmute. That's a good question. Yes, there is on RTAP's additional resources page. They have very long and extensive and thorough guides to their GTFS builder, which will explain what the macros are. And if you're unfamiliar with macros, it'll explain how to enable them and basically what they do.
Thank you. I'm putting our YouTube page at YouTube in the chat right now, so everyone will have it. Okay, I think all there's no open questions right now. there's almost 350, there's over 350 of us still on here. So if you have a question, type it in the chat box now, and we'll just wait a minute in uncomfortable silence while you do so. Linda Norton says, some of our maps are not showing in the FTA census map. Is because they are seasonal.
That is a very good question that I don't have a good answer for. Melissa or Taisha or Lee, does anyone know?
Yes, I can. Linda, I think I'd probably need a little bit more information, but it could be related to the national transit map layer that's used. I'm not sure when that was last refreshed. So Linda, if you don't mind just chatting me your NTD ID, I can look into that for you.
Thank you. Tara wants to know, how do you turn on the census designated places on the FTA census places map, which is hard to say.
Yeah, that's a mouthful.
Oh,
You
sorry,
go,
Jared.
Melissa. You go.
That one, or
No,
you
no,
want me
you
to
go.
take it? Yeah, that's a great question, Tara. So when you're in the FTA census map, if you click on the second icon on the left, it looks like little sheets of paper. It says layers. If you go into the layers option in ArcGIS and then click on the FTA administrative boundaries section and click the drop down arrow, you should see an option there for census designated places, and you can select the eyeball kind of towards the right, and that should load the census designated places layer on the FTA census map. And you can also too, if it is helpful, once you do that, over on the right side of the page, if you want to add labels to see what those census places are without clicking into each one, there is a tag icon over on the right in ArcGIS where you can click and it should say labels if you hover over it. And you can add the label class for whichever layer you are working with to add that, so that when you're looking at a certain area, those labels will show up automatically. On the FTA census map page that I shared in the chat, there should be a couple of guides on how to use ArcGIS and use this map. So there are some cool features in there, maybe not ones you'd use every day, but if you're new to ArcGIS, it's really helpful to kind of see how you can use this map to your advantage. But if you ever have questions on how to use it, you can always direct those to your NTD analyst, and we're happy to kind of walk you through that as well.
Great. Okay, so I want to just pause for 1 second because Carlos just put in the chat that he saw a lot of questions in the chat, and I'll give you this shameless plug, Carlos. He has a Discord, if you know what that is, youngins, for GIS related public transit questions and discussion, and put the link in there. So if that's your thing, sign up. Good idea. Thomas asks, if y'all have the time, could you kindly touch on what steps would be needed in order to provide live bus tracking to be available for use by Google Maps / other apps?
Yeah, absolutely. So that is a really good question because that's kind of the next step. Once you have a GTFS feed that's static, that just shows your routes and stops, the next step is getting, okay, this bus is 3 minutes late because it's experiencing some traffic over here. You need to equip your buses with a thing called AVLs, automatic vehicle locators, which is basically just a GPS that pings a satellite back and forth and gives real-time updates about the actual location along a route that a vehicle is. That's not required, but that would definitely benefit your riders if that's something you're interested in looking into. And to be honest with you, I've never worked with an agency that is looking to do that. So if you want to pilot that, that'd be really interesting, and I'd love to hear how it goes.
So Jeremiah, this is a two-parter combo question between Jeremiah and Marcy. which I didn't even know was a thing we could do, but are there any plans to require actual corridors like, I'm going to say this, the GeoJSON files be shared so that we can have a national transit map with the corridors for non-fixed routes? And then there's a follow-up, but I don't know if you want to answer that first and then do the follow-up.
Yes, I think Marcy answered this from a
Okay.
GTFS perspective. But from the national transit map aspect, I also am not sure when or if that would be considered for the national transit map. The NTD program at FTA does work closely with the Bureau of Transit Statistics, who is the agency that puts together the national transit map. So I just don't have an answer at this time on that, but something I can bring up to management.
Okay, I'm sorry, I don't know this person's name. It's just a bunch of letters and numbers. Maybe that's your name. Can GTFS be used to build apps that agencies can use for on-demand services?
I'm sorry, could you please repeat that question, Laurie?
Oh, sure. It's in the box if you wait, did it disappear? Marcy answered, I think, also, but can GTFS be used to build apps that agencies can use for on-demand services? And then Marcy wrote, National RTAP offers a workaround until the GTFS Flex is fully adopted, so no to a perfect fit with GTFS and microtransit.
Yep, that's a perfect answer. Thank you, Marcy.
Thank you, Marcy. Jessica says, we have AVLs, but they seem to have some errors on the real-time feed. It says, quote, feed too old. How can I fix this?
Feed too old could be a variety of things. It could be that the calendar.txt, one of those required text files that I mentioned, is out of date. So say it's for 2023 to January 1st, 2025. That could be it. It could also be that well, actually, that's the main point that I can come up with. So I would say look at calendars.txt and make sure that your feed is actually up to date. So in this calendar year. And if you have any questions, please reach out because selfishly, I would love to look at a feed that is using these AVLs and just get ahead of this.
Thank you. Lisa says, we report paratransit service under DR, but recently added microtransit service out of state/county as a pilot program. Do we report the pilot program under the B15? Oh, it looks like Lee was typing an answer, but
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'm sure Lee will put this in the chat too. Pilot programs are not reportable to the NTD. But if you just want to let your analysts know, about any pilot programs or anything that you may be reporting in the future, once it becomes regular and continuing, it's always just good for us to have a heads up. But short answer is no, you would not include that information in your B15 form. And I just want to point out, I prematurely answered a question about not seeing updated stops and routes in the national transit map. And I believe this relates back to Linda's question as well from Low Country Regional Transportation Authority. So the national transit map layer in the FTA census map that we sent in the chat, that's not updated in real time. So if you've submitted your web link to the NTD for your 2024 report, that wouldn't automatically show up in the FTA census map because we do have to go through validation for those links. I will check with the folks who manage the ArcGIS map and see how frequently the national transit map layer is updated. I don't unfortunately have an idea of when that was last updated. But that is likely why if you've updated your feed recently, That's likely why you're not seeing it in the FTA census map with any recent changes. It could be that, you know, once that gets refreshed after report year 2024, it may show up in the FTA census map. So I hope that helps answer a couple of questions related to that connection there. But if you have any more, please feel free to chat them. Thanks.
Thanks, Melissa. Do we have the link? Gabe wants the link to the intro GIS that was mentioned. Is that was that on the slide or was that?
Yeah, I think he's referring to, and Gabe, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he's referring to the RTAP page that will have how to build a GTFS feed. I can't access that right now just because I'm sharing, but if someone could link Gabe to the RTAP page, I would appreciate that.
I'm seeing Taisha asked Corey to add something to the Q&A box, but I don't know if it was. Oh, okay. So Thomas, there's something directly for, has a question directly for Jared. Where could I find more information about implementing live updates and what that process would look like from initial start to finish?
There we go. There's the unmute. Thomas, that is a really good question. I actually don't have a resource off the top of my head just because this isn't a requirement yet, but you're thinking multiple steps ahead, which is exciting. So I would reach out to the people at RTAP who are pretty consistently ahead of the game on this. And Marcy will probably link me in with that as well as you look to implement real-time stuff. Great question.
Great, thank you. I think that's it for open questions right now. Everyone, keep in mind you have the handouts with the last slide here, and it has the email addresses on. So if you think of a question after this ends, you can still ask it. I'll wait another couple of minutes to see if any more questions come in. But while we're waiting, I'll just mention that you will be receiving an evaluation survey from NTI about the session. If you could just take a couple of minutes and fill that out. We love the feedback. Our funder loves the feedback. So please do that. So Nancy says, so for clarification, the B15 is for demand response service only, no fixed routes. On question 8, for our service, our passengers must be either rated conditional ADA, unconditional ADA, or live more than 4 blocks from our fixed routes. So would we mark yes to the first and third columns?
Yeah, so I think I'm understanding the question, Nancy. So are you yeah, for the categories in question 8. Okay. Yeah, so if your service, it sounds like it is restricted to folks that are either qualifying for ADA. I guess the last option there, live more than 4 blocks, is that I don't know if that's related to ADA or if that's just anyone that lives more than 4 blocks. So that could serve anyone. If that's the case, then it sounds like this service would be general population you would mark yes to, but it doesn't sound like it's restricted to only ADA passengers. But I'm also happy to talk through that last section a little more, just to make sure I understand it. Or Nancy, if you know who your NTD analyst is, you can chat with them on how to report that in the form and make sure we have all the details right to give you the right instructions. And I'm happy to provide, okay, you're the new analyst at your agency. Okay, do you, if you could share your agency name, I can help connect you with your NTD assigned analyst that's supposed to help you fill out the NTD report and provide guidance.
Thank you. Let me see.
Okay, all right, Nancy, I will do some research and put that in the chat for you.
Thank you. It looks like Lee is answering. I'm sorry, I'm gonna butcher your name. Is it Kwaku? Is a pilot microtransit service that replaces fixed route service reportable? It looks like Leah's answering, which doesn't help me right now when I'm talking.
So Lee will probably say this, and I think Melissa explained it earlier, but services that are pilots don't meet FTA's definition of regular and continuing services. So pilot programs are not reportable to the NTD. If you have specific questions about your pilot program, you can always work with your assigned validation analyst, and they'll be happy to double check everything, how you operate, how long the service is running, and any other details just to confirm that it is not reportable.
Thanks, Taisha. I threw that in there too, and that Kwaku was actually one of my agencies, so it was good to connect with him on that one.
Oh, it's great. Okay, that's it for open questions currently. Can wait a little bit longer to see if any more come in, but then everyone will be free to go. Thanks, everybody. I guess we're done. You have the emails. You do have questions. Again, the survey. I want to thank everyone for their help and their presentations. Taisha, Jared, Lee, Melissa, thank you. I mean, I can't obviously do this. I don't know the info. I guess we'll see everyone next time, and have fun filling out your NTD forms.
Thank you, Lori. And I just want to give a quick shout out to Marcy from RTAP.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your help today, answering questions, and your help always for GTFS. If anyone has any questions, we would direct you to your NTD analyst for all things NTD, but for GTFS stuff, we can connect you with Jared from our team and Marcy at RTAP, who have been instrumental in helping agencies get their feeds ready. So heavily encourage you to check out RTAP's GTFS Builder, and let us know if you have any other questions. Thanks, everyone.